What's going on, everyone? TC Ty Killer here, and thank you for joining me and coming back to the preseason top 25 countdown. This is video number 2 in the 3-part mini-series, and these ones are going to be the 20 through 11th ranked teams in the nation. And if you haven't checked out the last video, it was the 25 through 21 with a little addition of the first 5 out, so 26 through 30 teams, as well as a little bit of an introduction to the series. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, it should be pretty straightforward. It's just rankings. I ranked these teams before the AP poll came out, and then I'm just now doing my own little video just to show you guys what my rankings were, and I'll come back and see how they are throughout the year, and at the end of the year how well I did and how close I got to their actual ranking. And I'll probably update it every couple of weeks, maybe once a month, something like that, but not every single week or too often. Tell me what you guys think about these rankings, too high, too low, what you think about these teams included. And yeah, so without any additional thoughts, let's get it started here with number 20. I have the Texas Longhorns. They went 9-4 last year and beat Oregon State 31-27 in the Alamo Bowl, and if I remember correctly, there was 9 or 10 sacks by Texas, which was crazy amount, and really the detriment to Oregon State. Mac Brown is in his 16th season with this, and the fans are getting a little bit upset with him, rightfully so. Kind of stumbled the past few years. In 2010, they went 5-7. Getting a little bit back up there, but not to those national title years in about 5-10 years ago. They've had 3 consecutive losses to Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry, and so that's one thing the fan base doesn't like at all. They want to keep it competitive, trade wins, if not win all the games. So Oklahoma is loving it, but not necessarily Texas, which is the traditional powerhouse there. I'm not sure on the rivalry record, but I would assume it's in Texas's favor just because of their tradition. On the offense, David Ash is the only true returning quarterback in the Big 12 this year. There's a couple of other ones, but I don't really count them as returning starting quarterbacks, and that is because, like at ISU, Iowa State, they switched quarterbacks about halfway through. At Oklahoma State, they've kind of used 2 or 3 quarterbacks throughout the year last year, and Westland transferred. And so hopefully they'll get a more finite person, but I'm not going to count it as a full returning quarterback. Maybe like a half, since one of the 2 will be the quarterbacks and will be returning technically. And then there's TCU, which is another kind of returning. I'm not sure who's starting that game. David Packall, something, returning from a DUI charge and suspension, but Trevor Boykin looked pretty good last year, and they're looking for some continuity at the team, so who knows. But this is not TCU's time, it is Texas's time. So David Ash, the only one true returning starter. He was a 10-3 as a starter last year, and the year before he was out a couple games, I'm assuming. The top 2 running backs return in John Gray and Malcolm Brown. Gray had 701 yards last year, and all 5 offensive linemen returned, so that's definitely going to bode well for those running backs there. And to the offense in general. On the defensive side, they were pretty bad last year, giving up 440 yards per game and 34 points per game. And they have 3 seniors on the defensive line, so some experience there that will definitely come in handy. We all know about that tackling video from the Oklahoma game, where one of them missed 3 tackles. So they should improve. They have a good returning group, including potential All-American Quandre Diggs at cornerback, and he was the interceptions leader last year at 4. So their measuring stick game is going to be Oklahoma on October 12th, about midway through the season. They need to win it and make that rivalry extra good again. Texas in the AP poll is ranked number 15th, but 20th here, so we'll see how they do. Moving on to number 20, I have Miami. And a little bit of a surprising pick. I didn't really realize this I thought they did better last year, but 7-5 last year, so maybe 19 might be a little too optimistic for them. Al Gordon is returning for his third year, and they have a self-imposed bowl ban last year and looming NCAA sanctions, so who knows what's going to happen with this team, so this could be a moot point at the end of the year. They're looking for their first ACC championship game appearance, and that was really interesting to me. I've only been watching college football a couple years now, and you would think Miami would have gone to at least several of those championship games, but maybe they just joined in the 90s or something like that, because they were dominant in the early 90s, and you hear great things about the U all the time, so that one really surprised me as like a fourth, third-year viewer. They played 16 true freshmen last year, so they're going to have a lot of experience, not only this year, but going on into future years. On the offense, they have Stephen Morris returning at quarterback after the 5th best season at quarterback in Miami history in terms of yards. He threw 3,345 yards, but only was 58% accurate. That was his completion percentage, so a little bit low on the low side, but I mean, I guess if you're getting the yards, that works. Wide receiver Philip Dossett comes back, the #1 receiver from last year, 842 yards in 2012. Duke Johnson, we all know, All-American freshman, or freshman All-American last year. 6.8 yards per carry, so that was a huge number after 139 attempts. He also handles the kick returns and had 892 yards kick return yardage last year. So he's going to be a big impact on this team and how far they can go in the ACC and get to that finally ACC championship game. On the defensive side, they lose sophomore linebacker Eddie Johnson. He was suspended at the end of last year and then left school in mid-March. They do return 2 of their top tacklers, though, as well. And one bad thing, if you watched a Miami game, is they allow a lot of points. They allowed 30-plus points in 7 out of 12 games and 40 points 3 times. So definitely that's something to keep an eye on for that defensive coordinator. Hopefully they can allow less, but their offense is pretty good, so they can just outscore everyone for the most part. They particularly struggled against the run, led up 218 yards per game in that category. So that is Miami, and they are ranked. They are not ranked in the AP poll, and you could definitely make a case for that. I'm kind of just going off projection. Usually there's 2 or 3 teams from the ACC that are ranked throughout the season. So as long as they take care of games of lesser foes, they should be fine. I have their matchup game against Florida, and that is the 2nd week of college football. It will be in Gainesville. No, it will be in Miami. So a little bit of an advantage for them, but they do lack the advantage on the talent side. Moving on to number 18, fittingly, is Florida. And they are in the SEC East, and they will be trailing the likes of South Carolina and Georgia. They went 11-2 last year and lost to Louisville in the Sugar Bowl. 33-23 was the final score. And I mean, you might say that they had a lackluster performance, not motivated because of the team they were playing. But I mean, you still got to get up and play for that BCS Bowl. That's still an accomplishment for any team to get to a BCS Bowl at the end of a season. So their offense was pretty dismal. In the SEC, they ranked 10th in scoring offense, 12th in total offense at 334 yards per game, and 14th, dead last in passing offense. I think a big part of that is Jeff Driscoll. He definitely needs to improve just his consistency, and I've heard that they've been working a lot on actually passing and not running, because he had 413 yards rushing last year compared to 1,646 yards passing, so almost 20% of his total yards was to rushing. And Florida threw for the lowest yards since 1989, so that's a huge discrepancy, I guess you would say. At the running back position, they lost Mike Gilsey, the 1,000-yard rusher, and Matt Jones looks to be in line for the starting job. He's one of 3 scholarship running backs on the roster. But he's going to be out for the first game and is questionable for the Miami game because of a viral infection. So that's going to be something to look out for. On the defensive side, we'll look at wide receiver real quick. Doesn't look very great because Andrew DeBose out for the year with the ACL injury just last month, I believe. And they have one of their other wide receivers is a converted cornerback. So it might be a little of an adjustment period for him to get into the game. And he was the leading tackler. So that might affect them on the defensive side too. Just a little bit. I believe he's trying to play a little bit of both sides. But let's see where his stamina is. And like I said, defense was the strength for Florida last year. In the SEC, they were second in total yards allowed, rush yards allowed, and points allowed. So, I mean, that's good being number 2 in the SEC. They have key losses everywhere this year, though, so they're a little bit of a drop-off maybe. They lose 2 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and both safeties. And like I said, one of their cornerbacks is converted to a wide receiver. I see them going about 8-4 with their schedule. Tough schedule, one of the toughest in the nation. And you might think I would choose the Miami game as well for them for their measuring stick, but I think they're actually going to handle it a little better. I don't know, it's an interesting matchup, but I'm not going to go for that one. I'm going to go for the October 12th game at LSU. That's a pretty big time matchup, and if Florida can beat Miami, it looks like they could be undefeated going into that LSU game, and it will be a top 10 matchup, maybe. So who knows? Florida is ranked number 10 right now in the AP poll, but 18 in my rankings. Moving on to number 17 is Wisconsin, and Gary Anderson coming from Utah State for his first year in an AQ school. They lost to Stanford 20-14 in the Rose Bowl and looking for their fourth straight Rose Bowl appearance. But will Ohio State finally be eligible, and will they pass them? They're expected to, but can Wisconsin put up a fight against Ohio State when they come to battle on September 28th? On the offense, they lose Monte Ball, a huge production machine at running back, 1,800 yards last year and 22 touchdowns. They have a couple of running backs that will take over, it looks like by committee right now. James White, who had 806 yards last year, and Melvin Gordon, who had 621 yards last year. At quarterback, 3 different QBs have played in those 3 straight Rose Bowls that they have gone to. Joel Stave looked to be the favorite after getting game time last year in 8 games, but Coach Anderson won't announce till the opener who it's going to be. Some people have said Kurt Phillips looks like he's getting the edge in spring ball and fall camps, but whoever gets it will have good targets at the wide receiver and tight end positions, including all Big Ten Jared Abbrederis, who had 837 yards last season. On the defensive side, which will be one of the weaknesses for Wisconsin, they allowed 19 points per game and 322 yards per game last year. So not bad. They have 3 seniors starting on the DL, and all Big Ten Chris Borland returns anchoring the D in the middle inside linebacker position. And he had 104 tackles last year, which was second for the team. Lots of youth in the secondary. But, I mean, hopefully that bodes well for future years. They're switching up their D looks a little bit with a 3-4 with a new defensive coordinator, Dave Aranda. So that is Wisconsin. Trying to get through these a little bit fast so I don't make a 25-minute video again. But it looks to be running a little long already. Their measuring stick game is going to be, like I said, at Ohio State on September 28th. One of the big games here, and probably will decide the leader representative in the Big Ten championship game, and they are ranked number 23rd in the AP poll. Moving on to number 16, I have Texas A&M, and we all have heard Johnny Manziel's summer and how that's gone with the Manning camp and pleading guilty on his fake ID charge, as well as that autograph scandal that's not really a scandal right now, but could loom large here in the next few months and could determine A&M's season, kind of. So how will they do this year? He had 3,700 yards passing, 1,400 yards rushing, 47 touchdowns overall, so whole lot of touchdowns out of him. Everyone's looking for that Alabama rematch on September 14th. The defensive coordinators for the rest of the league have had the offseason to prepare for him and mix it up a little bit. Hopefully get him to scramble less and kind of contain him and make him throw and make plays with his arms. They lose their offensive coordinator, however, to Texas Tech, and they lose a bunch of talent like Luke Joeckel. He was a first-round overall pick and the Outland Trophy winner. They do get Jake Matthews back, and he is a potential All-American at the left tackle position. On the outside, they only return Mike Evans, who had 1,105 yards last year, but they lose their number 2, 3, and 4 wide receivers. They also lose their running back, Christine Michael, in the backfield, and is going to have to rely on Ben Molina, 808 yards last year, or Oklahoma transfer Brandon Williams. The defense allowed 21.8 points per game and 390 yards per game, so kind of average. I think maybe on the little down on the bad side of the SEC, but I'm not sure about it. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. 3 of their top 5 tacklers returned, so defense looks okay. They did lose some talent, mainly on the offensive side, but that might be able to be overcome by Johnny Manziel. So Texas A&M is ranked number 7 in the AP poll, but I have them way down at 16 here. However, they probably should be a little higher. I was looking at their schedule, and I only see really 2 questionable games, and that is the Alabama and LSU games. All the other ones are very, very, very winnable. And so the LSU is kind of later in the season, so that might knock them down a few depending on where LSU is at that time. I have their matchup game against Alabama in that 3rd week. As we all know, that might be the game of week 3. So there's that. And moving on to number 15, I have another Big Ten team, Nebraska. They went 10-4 last year and lost to Georgia in the Capital One Bowl, one of 2 big losses to end the season, as well as that 70-31 beatdown by Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. Their offense will be powered by Taylor Martinez. He's trying to get more accurate instead of rushing all the time. He had over 1,000 yards rushing last year and 2,500 yards passing and 33 total touchdowns, so major part of the team, keep him healthy. On the wide receiver spot, it's pretty familiar. Kenny Bell, he's a junior, 17.3 yards per catch, one of his big targets last year. And they're looking for more people to step up, maybe some underclassmen. In the backfield, they have Amir Abdullah, a 1,000-yard rusher last year, and trying to gain some depth with, again, recruits and red shirts that are coming back. On the defense, they gave up a combined 1,229 yards in the final 2 games, the Georgia game and the Wisconsin Big Ten Championship. In that Big Ten Championship, they gave up 640 yards versus Wisconsin, and 539 of those were on the ground. That is ridiculous. They gave up 8 touchdowns on the ground as well. And they lost 63-38 to Ohio State last year. Hopefully this year they can keep it a little bit closer. And looking at the schedule, they don't even play Ohio State, so they can't really do anything about that. But maybe a Big Ten matchup there, championship game matchup. We can only hope. 8 starters are gone on the defensive side, so a lot of youth has to come in. 3 new starting linebackers, and secondary seems to be okay, in okay shape. So Nebraska is ranked 18th in an AP poll, and I have their measuring stick game. Again, another 3rd week game. UCLA will come to town, and Brett Hundley will tear his secondary apart, and the defense needs to hold if they're wanting to win that game. So Nebraska, number 15. Moving on to number 14, I have Florida State, the ACC team, the second ACC team in my top 25. 12-2 last year under Jimbo Fisher's 4th year. First ACC championship since 2005 and the first BCS Bowl win in 13 years. E.J. Manuel is now gone to the NFL. He was huge for them, 68% completion percentage and 3,400 yards. On the offense, they have Clint Trickett, a redshirt junior who transferred. And James Winston won the quarterback job there. He is a redshirt freshman, I believe, and he is highly. They have high expectations from them. All you can hear online is like hype around Winston, and poor guy. Definitely not a good thing when you haven't thrown a college pass yet. All 5 offensive line return. Best thing for Winston or Clint Trickett. Clint Trickett. Yeah, for Winston. I'm sorry. Getting a little mixed up. Most of the wide receiver core returns as well, so that can only help the new QB. Rashad Green led the team in receptions last year with 57. And in the backfield, 2 600-yard rushers, Devonta Freeman and James Wilder Jr., who was the ACC championship game MVP. They will be probably by committee until someone is figured out, if at all. On the defensive side, the entire defensive line is gone. They have a new defensive coordinator and 3 returning starters in the secondary. They lose Xavier Rhodes in the first round of the NFL draft. And 1 linebacker returning in Christian Jones, 95 tackles. He was the tackling leader on the team. But they've had a few loaded recruiting classes the past few seasons and just can keep reloading with the talent they're bringing in. Florida, one of the big recruiting states. So definitely can be a little bit easier on them for depth. For their matchup game, their measuring stick game, I have at Clemson on the 19th of October. Should be one of the great ACC games, as these two are the traditional powers there. The AP poll has them ranked 11th. I have them 14th, so we will see how that concludes at the end of the season or a few games in. Moving on to the number 13 team, I have Oklahoma. Bob Stoops currently going into his 15th season, and they went 10-3 last year in the Big 12 and got to share that Big 12 title. Their 3 losses were to Heisman candidate and top 10 teams, and that was Notre Dame, Kansas State, and Texas A&M. They are replacing Landry Jones, and a little bit of a surprising quarterback battle just getting settled. Trevor Knight comes out on top above Blake Bell, the Belldozer. He had 24 touchdowns in the past couple of years just because of his size, but they choose not to go with him. He was the popular pick among the media, but Trevor Knight getting the nod above him, and so we'll see how that works out. They signed the top Big 12 recruiting class last year, but they did not crack the top 15 for the nation. On the offensive side, they are pretty loaded at the running back position. Damian Williams returns after 946 yards last year, and Brendan Clay behind him, who just went off against Oklahoma State, especially in overtime, clinching that game essentially. They got 1 offensive lineman gone, so full line back basically, and they get 2 back from ACL injuries, so that can only add to it. That's pretty rare. You get more people coming in that are expected to do better than people coming out, if that makes sense. On the defense, they surrendered 40-plus points in 3 of 4 games of their final games, and that is pretty surprising. When you think of Oklahoma, you think a little bit more defense, or at least that's how I think. Like I said, I've only been watching college football a couple years now and really paying attention. On the defensive side, they only returned 4 starters. Aaron Colvin at cornerback, who was the interception leader with 4, defensive tackle, and 2 linebackers. So the rest is a little bit sketchy for the defensive side for Oklahoma. And it's going to be interesting to see how they stack up against those pass-happy teams such as Baylor, West Virginia, and Oklahoma State. I have their measuring stick game at Notre Dame on the September 28th. Oklahoma is ranked 16th in the AP poll and 13th here. Moving on to the final 2 teams, we have number 12, UCLA Bruins. They went 9-5 last year. They dropped 3 straight to end the year. Very disappointing end to the season, but I think they're going to do some good things this year. The battle for LA is kind of more relevant against USC, more significant. They do lose James Franklin, their school record setter for yards, at 1,700 last year. One of those losses that were the 3 straight was a 49-26 wallop by Baylor in the Holiday Bowl. And just can't have that, especially when you're trying to look like your conference is strong against other teams. Bowl games are important for that matter. A good thing for UCLA is they play in the Pac-12 South, which is kind of wide open right now between them, Arizona State, and USC, with maybe a sneaker team getting in there. But for the most part, they're relatively weaker than, say, the North or some other divisions in college football. So that can only help them as far as scheduling goes. In the offensive position, they are set with Brett Hundley at the QB. I talked about him just a second ago. And he had 3,700 yards last year, which was a record for the single season passing yards at the school. He's a dark horse Heisman candidate by some people. Behind him, they have 5 potential starters after losing Franklin, so it might be like a by committee type thing in the first few weeks before someone stands out. They look pretty decent at wide receiver. Shaq Evans returns the leading wide receiver, 60 receptions for 877 yards last year. And they get Devin Lucien back from a broken collarbone that limited his playing time last year. On the defensive side, they got 3 big seniors at the defensive line, but have lots of holes to fill that they allowed 416 yards per game last year. Tevin McDonald released for a violation in the middle of the year last year. Maybe the ending of spring. I'm not sure. He was a second leading tackler, so that's a big hit for them. Inside linebacker Eric Hendricks. Is that right? That doesn't seem right. Eric Kendricks comes back. He led the Pac-12 with 10.6 tackles per game. And as we all know, if you follow the Pac-12, Anthony Barr came out of nowhere last year, converted running back who surprised a lot of people. He's a projected first-round draft pick next year after he decided not to go to the NFL last year, which he could have been first, second, or third round draft picks. So there's the UCLA Bruins. Their schedule doesn't really help at Stanford, at Oregon, at USC. So it's going to be hard for them to get up there, but hopefully that strength of schedule kind of helps them if they can get an upset or two. I have their measuring stick at Nebraska in their second game, but the third week of the season, on the road against a big Big 12 team, a Big 10 team. So can they do it? I think they can. And the final team for today is Clemson Tigers, the final ACC team on my top 25. Dabo Swinney, it's in his 6th year. They went 11-2 last year, and the first consecutive 10-win season since the late 80s for Clemson in 2011 and 2012. A little off-topic thing, Howard's Rock was vandalized in the offseason. I'm sure you guys have all heard of that. I'm not really sure why I'm mentioning it. It doesn't really have anything to do with the team. But they did beat LSU 25-24, late field goal in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. So, I mean, good for them. Get a little motivation and momentum going into 2013. They have an electric duo in Taj Boyd and Sammy Watkins. Boyd is going to be a third-year starter. He had 3,896 yards last year. That is right around 300 yards per game, which is just amazing. A lot of teams, their quarterbacks, it's a great game if they go 300 yards, but this guy was doing it basically every game. He was 67.2% completion ratio and had 514 yards rusher, which he's a stat leader for that for returning players. Watkins, he had 57 receptions for 708 yards, and that was even without playing for 3 games, kind of. 2 of them were suspension games, and he had no catches versus LSU in their bowl game. They returned 4 starters on the offensive line, so like I say with most of the teams, that can only help them. And the likely starter at running back is Roderick McDowell. He had 450 yards last year as a backup. On the defensive side, a great performance against LSU. They held them to 219 yards, and they do lose 5 senior starters, 3 defensive backs, but they do have some good experience on the line and 3 juniors. They held their opponents to 200 points less than their offense scored. So Clemson scored 533 points last year, and their opponents scored 323. So a big difference, and that's definitely going to help you win some ball games. And not only that, the third down percentage for Clemson was 52%, which is fairly high if I understand correctly. And their fourth down percentage was 78%. So if you're looking to go against them on third, fourth down, you better bring it all. UCLA is ranked 21st in the AP poll, and Clemson is ranked 8th in the AP poll. So that's going to do it for my top 20 through 11 teams. I'll do one more episode. Hopefully it'll be a little bit quicker than this. This is half an hour. This is crazy. Hopefully I do some timestamps or something, or else no one is going to watch the full thing. So there's that. Thank you for watching. If you watched most of this, thank you. Please like and subscribe, and check back for the last part. And let's get to some college football next weekend.